Alrighty, everybody. Let's see what kind of game we can get into today. It's the middle of the afternoon, actually. I'm on my lunch break. Since I've been working from home, I just pop over. So I'm gonna hop over here to my other computer. I threw some leftovers in the oven to warm up. So let's see what happens. All right. My opponent leads off with e4. Here we go, e5. This is a 10 plus 5. So we've got that increment to help make sure that we don't we don't get down to a time crunch at the very end. We probably will still run into time crunches, but we shouldn't run into anything that's so dramatic that we get too frustrated. Okay, let's try. So I'm debating between c5 or b4. b4 is probably just going to encourage this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. I want to route my bishop down to get along this diagonal. Now I'll move my knight up, and I'll get ready to castle. I don't know if this is the correct move order. It's just something that... So I didn't want to just stick my bishop blindly on c5 because there is a potential trap. The only thing defending this pawn is this particular knight. So your opponent captures, you capture back. I have a knight and a bishop. This pawn push, that's something new. I don't know this move. It's okay, we can rotate the knight around. That's all right. This knight will come to here. This knight will eventually go here. Ah, well, of course, that takes care of that. Right, so that's a move order I was not expecting. So, as I was saying, that knight is the only thing protecting that pawn, so therefore that pawn is a bit exposed. I'm going to go ahead and castle and stick my rook under here. Yeah, I'm okay there. Let's go ahead and castle. This is a backwards pawn, so this will become a target for me. I'd like to figure out a way to get some pressure on that particular pawn at some point in time. So these are my candidate moves. Yeah. The only reason I don't want to do this is because it invites this and opens up, but I can always capture back with my f-pawn, so let's do that. So I'm defending my knight with my queen, and this knight I'll take back with the f-pawn and open up my rook, if it comes to that. So we were prepared. We didn't lose any time on that. In fact, we probably gained a couple seconds back. So I'm going to stick my rook under here, bearing down on my opponent's king if possible. Just like that. So this pawn is pinned, so my opponent cannot capture. Now he can capture, but I can start here. That bishop is pinned. This is attacked. Eventually this rook's gonna just go home. All right, so now what's next on the agenda? I've got to get my bishop out, right? So that's the next goal, is to get the bishop out and about. Just debating if this is worth anything. No, because it brings the queen around. So let's just go here. This was an option I was considering throwing in. I don't think it does anything. It would come with check. My opponent, no, he's played this really interesting. This has been interesting. This is not anything that I know. My opponent's name is Scuderia Ferrari. He's going right back to that. That's fine. That's a possibility. I don't love it, but it's a possibility. All right, so my opponent's looking to push, right? Which would be a double attack. Open this diagonal and attack the bishop. And so, first things first is we need to hide our king so that there is no double attack. This guy is now undefended. So if my opponent were to castle, this becomes a free piece. More importantly, this, if I run my queen up to here, becomes a threat of checkmate. My opponent is defending. This is not my favorite move in the world, but I am doubling up, right? So this could be a trade. The only thing defending this is the queen, and so that is more valuable than that. So my opponent, there you go. So he's now added an additional defender. Question is, do I take? I'm tempted for this. I'm really tempted to go here, but that leaves both of my bishops completely undefended. This is a bad move. I'm not happy with this position at all. I'm just trying it. Notice this would basically remove the defender. If my opponent moves it, it traps the rook. I would make this trade. I'd be happy to make that trade right now. But if my opponent captures with the knight, then they drop a rook. There you go. Excellent move, my friend. Excellent, excellent move. So now I have a decision to make. I could start here, capture, capture, capture. Yeah, let's go with that. So this is a threat. I'm assuming my opponent will capture back here. I'm going to start with this. This is threatening mate. So I'm going to start with this. I do need to really be cautious of trapping my bishop, right? So if I were to retreat, then this pawn push would trap the bishop. So we're going to eye up the base of this pawn chain. So if I capture here, it moves the... No, I guess it doesn't. It does not, right? Because the queen would be here and the queen is still defending. That's the power of the queen. If my opponent castles, either way, capture. All right, so now I have a choice. How do I want to capture back? I think I'm just going to go like this. Okay, so my opponent has wiggled out of trouble. That's very good. We're even in material. I'm scanning the whole board. I'm trying to really focus on scanning the whole board. What are my opponent's threats? Not particularly this, but getting down along these seem to be some scary points, right? These lines could start opening up. So the thought process being I'm going to try to open up this line. If we see a capture, then I have successfully opened up a line that, you know, like I planned. I did not want to do it here and accidentally, I didn't want to open up the D file because my opponent has control of the D file already. I'm just looking to see if there's anything, any place else I want to go with this particular bishop. If things start to open up, maybe. But let me think here. While it'd be capture. This is sitting out here, but it's defended by the rook. Then maybe I can slide up. No, that's defended by the queen, so that lines out. So maybe we just go... Let's just go here. Yeah. It's not a defended piece, and so I have to be really careful of the fact that that's not a defended piece. But I like keeping an eye on this particular file. I like the idea that my rooks might get free. Maybe something like this. Make sure I don't mess up. So I've got two attackers on that bishop. My opponent has one defender. He's going to have to slide a rook over, I believe. All right, so let's go back over here. What happens if I capture? My opponent could capture this way, and he would have access to this pawn. I'd have to push that pawn. My opponent could capture. My opponent would still have access to this pawn. Okay, so maybe I can't capture this pawn. So that's the thought process, is maybe I do not have access to capturing this pawn because it gives my opponent initiative. I have to be a little bit cautious. I'm gonna go ahead and pre-move that because that's probably what's going to happen next. But that gets us up a whole piece. That's what we want to see. My opponent has put his pawns on dark squares over here on the king side, so my light square bishop might be able to do some good. Perhaps. So now we're up a piece. All right. Our goal now is to attack the base of these pawn chains. I'm trying to decide what the best way to do that would be. Maybe I didn't need to do that. I don't know. Maybe I could have. I'm not certain. I'm not certain where that rook belongs. My opponent could simply push one of these guys and defend that. But then I can bring this bishop into play, perhaps. I'm thinking now, though, now's the time to bring my other rook into play as well, along this open file. Maybe? So let's start here. If my opponent captures downward, then I can bring the other rook down. But we'll start picking up that pawn. Is that necessary? Let me think. Is that necessary at all? Can I capture here? No, I don't want to cap. Remember I said we can't capture there. But now it is time to bring this bishop into play, and I'm wondering how to get it into play. Yeah, so let's start here, see if my opponent will trade rooks. I have to be careful. I have back rank issues. Okay, I have back rank issues. That is a concern. So let's start by... okay. So I have to trade. I have to trade because otherwise I lose this bishop. This is the kind of split fork that I want to get. I have back rank issues, so I have to push this pawn here. And that gives us some wiggle room. So that was important. So now this rook can roam. And we're up material, so let's get this rook roaming. We'll start here. If I go here, my opponent can just go here. Let's try this. I'm up material, so I want to trade down. I can actually capture here, though, and get, so I have a 3-2 majority over here, so yeah, this is the kind of trade that I can talk about. Oh, he just drops. And this is defending the queening square, so I'm okay. But I can do that. That was clever on my opponent's part. I didn't catch that. You guys saw me. I didn't catch that. So I didn't catch. See, I saw that this is what I saw. But I didn't catch that that moves him offline and the queening square becomes a dark square. My bishop can't defend that. So my opponent was looking to trade his rook for a queen. And now all I have to do is cut my opponent's king off, and I can clean up. His yeah. So first things first is we need to cut the opponent's king off, so he can't approach through there. He can't approach through here. And now my king can come into the game. My goal right now, literally, is I'm just going to come all the way over here, grab this pawn, and then push this guy to victory. This and this creates a fantastic roadblock. I'm probably going to push this pawn if I'm smart. I'll do that. This will be the next move. So now my opponent is stalemated on all their pawns. There's nothing he can do except wiggle his king back and forth. And I have nothing to do except grab this and drive my opponent's king away. There's an increment, so there's no time control. Look at this. Look at this glowing dot right on my nose. You can tell it's the afternoon, right? This rook is cutting off my opponent, literally can't do anything. In fact, I probably should come up here in a second. So that's the end of it. GG, well played. There is a way, I'm not going to turn the analysis on yet. There is a way that we could win this. Let's go back here. So now that we've locked all this up, right? So way back here, right here. Now that we've locked all this up, notice this bishop and this pawn are basically indestructible by my opponent's king. There is no way that king can get around and break this structure up, which means that pawn, this whole structure is going nowhere. These two pawns are blockaded. They're not going anywhere. The only thing my opponent can do is to get his king all the way around over here to get rid of this. My rook is blocking him off, along with the pawn and the bishop. So this king is dead in the water. So really, realistically, all I have to do is bring my king... Yeah, that's right. They can't cross this. Bring my king into the game and use my king to drive my opponent to the back. Do our... oh, not that. Not that. Don't do that, because that allows... luckily, actually, it doesn't in this case. But normally, you do not want to put your king there. In fact, I can even do... No, I don't want to do that. I'll say I can even come here. And restrict my opponent's king even more. All right, so now the trick is, if he comes here, I'm gonna do this without the engine or anything. These are all blocked, so I could go like this, because my king is defending my rook. He has to drive away. I can go this with my king. Notice the rook is cutting him off, so he has to now go back. So my king is cutting off these squares. My turn. I'm going to go here. And now I have to waste a move. See, now my king is cutting off all these. Now my rook, I would waste a move, but I don't want the king to escape, so I'm going to waste a move. The king has only one legal move, and this is checkmate. So we can do this just with a king and a rook. We can make that work. But we didn't have to. We were able to go all the way down here. And basically we just push this pawn up to victory, basically get ourselves a queen and a rook, and we do the same thing, but just easier. We had so much time left that it worked really well. Okay, let's take a quick peek at the analysis. So let's take a quick peek at, we'll put the opening explorer on, we'll put the engine on. I'm gonna leave the engine off for now. I'm gonna try to talk about these variations, or I'm gonna try to talk through my studying process without the engine, because I want to get better at evaluating by myself, right? So, so here we are in the a standard King's Knight opening. Typical moves. We know the Italian. We know the Ruy Lopez. My opponent went with this variation. I don't know this variation. It looks like the next most common moves are just continue to develop into this. I guess there's no bishop here though, so this is not a concern. Okay, right? That's valid. Yeah, we don't really transpose anything, so I'm gonna turn that off. This is the trap I was talking about. Is something like this, and then my opponent grabs a pawn, sacrificing their knight, but then pushes a pawn and now has forked me. So I have to, let's say, retreat, and he grabs the knight back. And notice we are now even on material, except he's up a pawn. So he's got all of his pawns, and I've lost a pawn. So that's what's called the center knight. No, the center fork. And so that's something when you play your bishop up, and that happens in the Italian game too. If my opponent had played the Italian game, and I had come back with the Italian game, this is something that is a possibility for the center fork. It's just something you want to be aware of. It is a way for your opponent to essentially go up just a pawn. It's just one pawn, but it is something you have to be aware of. So in this case, I decided not to bring my knight up. I decided not to put my bishop on c5. And because I didn't want to put it on c5, that meant that I had a few options of where I could put it, most notably e7. Right, e7 takes away this square completely from my opponent. But doing this, my opponent just pushed a pawn, we saw that, and then I just rotated back. So I felt fine in this position. These were backwards pawns, and so I have some targets. I was not at all prepared for this move. I wonder what the engine says here. Yeah, white is up a whole point of material already. From that sequence, you could see that sequence was a bad sequence because of exactly what happened. So that's something that I will learn not to do. Plain and simple. I'm not going to do that again. Well, I probably will do it again because I'll completely forget that this is a possibility. Yeah, and now my only defender of that pawn is gone. The best I can hope for is, yeah, just retreat the knight. Something like that just gives up a whole knight, right? I'm defending that pawn, but who cares? I gave up a whole knight. Not at all worth it. Right, even something like this, right? Yeah, you just lose the whole knight. It's just not worth it. Even trying something, yeah, there's not even a good place to rotate it to, like to get counter-attacking potential. This is the only other square I consider. I didn't want to bring it home. Bringing it back home, that felt really bad. Rotating it around in front of the king is a normal developing move. I did not feel good putting it on the wing, but the engine says that would have been okay. So, all right, so we rotate it around, we lose the pawn. Yeah, at this point in time, I just developed like normal, getting ready to castle. All right, I'm going to turn the engine on here because there were some moves that I probably missed. I was just going to say I probably missed some serious moves. So here is... sorry for the skip there. So here's a move that I didn't see at all, but notice it is a nice fork. So this aggressive opening by my opponent, by pushing all these pawns, did leave some holes that I missed. So, all right. What move did I make? I went from here, right. I rotated the knight around, kept it fairly even. My opponent traded. What does the engine say about taking back here? Yeah, first thought is, yeah, taking back with the f-pawn. So because my opponent is not castled, right? If I took with my h-pawn, This is, I mean, I can almost guarantee you this is one of the next moves. Like, let me turn the, let's see, what does the engine say? No, it doesn't. Okay, but I would immediately start pushing down here, right? So my knight is covering this square, so I'm not too concerned about the, well, and I guess this square really, no, it is covered, but I've got it covered twice. So even if my opponent, let's say I made a move, if my opponent pushed down, oh, well, right, the knight is pinned, right, the knight is pinned, so I'd have to take a knight. Yeah, that gets ugly pretty fast, though. It's, wow, it says, right, because the rook is trapped. All right, anyway, that was my concern, was, this is another reason why I don't like talking with the engine on, because I get distracted. Squirrel, you know? But this was my concern, was taking here and opening up this file while my opponent's rook is already on that file. So I didn't want to do that. So taking with the f-pawn, yes, okay, yes, it is opening up this diagonal. That's something I'll have to live with, but to me that was a little bit less dangerous than opening up this file with the rook already on it. My rook controls this file, so if I have to, I could stick my rook up there. I don't want to, but if I have to, I could. And a pawn push gets my bishop into the game too if I need. So that was my plan, or my thought process. Yeah, my opponent kept driving down, but this is not nearly as scary of a threat as it could have been. For the same reason, right? So for this, boom. So we talked about that over the board. Now it is a threat, but there's nothing, again, backing it up. This, I felt, was a weak move by my opponent. I did not like this. We go back to the engine again. Yeah, this bishop to f4. All right, well, the engine disagrees with me. Engine says that's a strong move. I disagreed. I thought that bishop f4 was a weak move. I felt that I'm just going to move this rook anyway, right? So, oops. So, you know, I just move the rook back and call it a day. I've essentially won a pawn, but realistically, all I've done is ensure that my opponent didn't steal my knight. That was the big thing, is I didn't lose material. And this drops the pin on my queen, frees up my knight to do things if I need to do things with my knight. And then my opponent bringing it right back. That, surely there was better moves for my opponent at this point in time. Yeah, developing probably makes the most sense. All right, turn that off. Turn it off. Developing probably makes the most sense, right? Yeah, me getting developed was important. And yeah, I'm glad I saw this. This was huge because let's say I missed it. That comes with check. However I choose, well, I guess I could block like that. Is that so bad? No, actually, it's winning. It's better. Okay, so that's not so scary. And then I get a pawn out of the deal. Yeah, all right, so that's not so bad. But that was the concern I had, was spotting this. That comes with check. And then I can pick up. Wow, that's clever. Okay. All right, that's clever. Alrighty, so moving on to the next crucial decision point in the game. The engine really wants me to sack on this because it comes with this. My opponent defended nicely. Yeah, how risky is this for black, though? Yeah, this pawn push seemed really strong. I don't know how to defend against that pawn push. I did read it correctly, though, that traps the, right, this traps, 100% traps the bishop. I guess I counterattack. But I mean, I'm down material though. It's even says that black is actually pretty good here, even though I'm down a whole piece. Okay. Oops, nah, I didn't mean to do that. Can I undo? Make main line. This should delete. Okay. Turn the engine back off. Okay, so my capture the engine doesn't love. Yeah, that capture the engine does not like at all. It says I have a huge advantage without that capture. I guess this is the threat. I'm trying to evaluate the threat here. So I guess this is the threat because this now comes with so capture. There's no more. I don't know. I don't see the threat. Sometimes the engine frustrates me because it doesn't tell me what I want to know. But it says the engine wasn't in love with this move, but it felt good, right? It felt really good. Going back to threatening checkmate. My opponent defended fairly well. Yeah, I still have a slight advantage. I just did not know how to convert. Queen d4 with check. But does that actually... Oh, that does... No, it doesn't do anything. Force a queen trade. Same thing, and then we're threatening to capture here, so my opponent has to do something about it. Okay. And then by moving off, we pick up the pawn, and now we've destroyed the pawn chain. Okay, now that is a big thing, right? So even though my opponent has saved his material, right, his main pieces were even on, I have now destroyed his pawn chain, and now this guy here becomes, oh, and even worse, I'm threatening the rook. So either I clean up this entire pawn chain and gobble, 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 or my opponent can save the exchange. That's, okay. I did not see that line at all. That's a good line. Yeah, essentially force a queen trade. Yeah, the engine wanted me to push up here. I was thinking about this move, but I wanted to make sure that if my opponent captured en passant, I could have access to this file. So that was the whole purpose of debating these rook moves, is figuring out which file could become open and getting my rook on, ready to go. If I had to defend this pawn, I could have pushed it up and gotten some kind of trade or something, I don't know. But if this guy became open, my pawn could become a target, so I had to keep an eye on that. So that was my waffling, but I was debating on, you know, what happens if I push c5 instead of c6. But if I push c5 and my opponent captured en passant, that would be good for me, because now I've got two connected pawns here, right? They're not passed or anything like that, but they're connected. Both of us have an isolated pawn on the wing, but I have control over the open file, and I felt like that gave me a little bit of an advantage. So I went c6 instead, planning on the same exchange, but I should have thought about, so that when I took the time to calculate out this capture here, right, captures, that's an even trade, but then this is exposed. So if I went, what was my opponent's next move? Yeah, so if I went capture, I can't even defend, because then capture, and that is now, you know, in trouble. So that's what I was, oops, my phone keeps ringing, guys, I'm sorry. That was the calculation. I should have done that ahead of time, and maybe I would have considered leaving the rook on a8, or maybe brought it over to c8 and eyed up this semi-open file. Or who knows, maybe brought it all the way over to d8. But once I did the calculation, I realized I shouldn't capture because that benefits my opponent. Then we just left it there the rest of the game. All right, so now here was retreating my bishop. Again, just supporting these exchanges if they ever take place. I don't know if that bishop's a good bishop or not. Yeah, and then here we go. I think the engine has the same thought process. No, it doesn't like that at all. I'm not sure what the structure is. I'm not even going to try to figure it out, so I'm going to leave that off. Turn the engine off. Okay, so yeah, this felt very strong to me. I'm now doubling up. I've got 2 attackers on this. My opponent simply could have just moved a rook over, and that would have stopped me, right? I'm now, because then capture, capture, right? I'm way down on the exchange there. So I fully expected my opponent to just rotate one of his rooks over. And notice, I no longer have a dark square bishop. So parking his rooks on dark squares can only help him, right? He doesn't have a dark square bishop either, so his light squares are freed up for his light square bishop. So all he had to do was rotate this guy around, and he defends it. I don't know what I would have done from here. Honestly, I do not know. Maybe even this. Yeah, probably this. And just gone for a straight, boring queen trade. Yeah, see, my opponent could have done that. And then, do I double up? I mean, that's not the end of the world. It's not horrible. I have access to this pawn here and this pawn here. That's not horrible. That would be okay. I could live with that. You have rook e1. We do a queen trade maybe. My opponent would probably have to leave that rook there, which would mean, let's say something like this to solidify this guy here, and then maybe I double up this way. It kind of forces my opponent into this passive position. And then what? Yeah, from here, we can capture a pawn. Because that's undefended. Yeah, we could do that. So we would basically be going up a pawn and trading down even to a simpler endgame. So we can do that. Okay. All right. So let's get rid of all this. This was defended. So this was a solid move by my opponent, but he just missed that I had 2 attackers here. So yeah, that gave me the option to capture, trade queens, end up an entire piece, and then from here, what does the engine say as far as where to go? Yeah, probably attack it this way. The only thing I didn't like was if I went here, my opponent pushed this pawn, then what? Because now I'd have to make a second move, and then he could push here. Well, I guess I still get it in the end. Okay, that's not the end of the world. Yeah, I was just worried that if I went after it with this first, it gives my opponent 2 pawn pushes, 2 turns, right? 1. God, come on, arrows. 1, 1, 2, 2, and he's kind of defended it from the rook, so it's not free. But I guess with the trades, I end up ahead anyway. All right, but from here, it felt really good. My opponent really didn't have any choice but to give up material. Yeah, again, I did not want to do this because then it's just a matter of capture, capture. Well, I guess I have this in the end. See, I just don't see that far ahead, though, sometimes. You know, I just don't, it's hard for me to see that far ahead. All right, so from this position, turn off the engine. I think we got it. We know the end game at this point in time. Yeah, and notice I have this square covered by my bishop. So I wanted to try to make sure that I didn't, right, we had back rank issues, and I really didn't want my opponent to be able to double up. So trying to force a trade as fast as possible of make sure my opponent doesn't get 2 rooks. That felt very strong to me. And then, yeah, this was a good move by my opponent, because if I move the rook to double up, my opponent grabs the free bishop. Right, and the best I can hope for in this scenario, I guess it comes with check, but I give up that free piece, and I didn't want to do that. And if I did something like that, then my opponent could just push a pawn. Well, no, I guess not. Yeah, they could. Because they could even retreat. Yeah, it's still good for me because now I'm technically doubled up here. All right, so it's still good for me. But trading was what I wanted to do. I'm up a piece. Trading simplifies the endgame and ensures that all I have to worry about is 1 rook on my opponent's side of the board. And then from here on out, this was an endgame. Felt really good about. Right here, I screwed up. No, not here. Yeah, right here. Oh no, not here. No, right. This is where my opponent played the pawn trap that could have been deadly. Right, that could have been really scary if I had really been relying on this as the sole defender. Luckily, I'm in a position where I can get over here. But if there had been something blocking me, right, even something as another pawn or something, and that had blocked me from getting over, that would have been a beautiful move by my opponent. But solid play. Yeah, or if this had been back 1 row and my opponent had been able to connect these connected passed pawns, connect these 2 pawns, that could have been scary as well. But luckily we got there. Right here, though, right here is where I feel like my opponent could have taken advantage of this. Because one of 2 things happens. Either I capture away and I undefend my bishop. My opponent doesn't really have an easy way of getting down to it, but it does become a liability, right? Not a liability, but it does weaken it somewhat because there's not the pawn there. And all my opponent has to do is use their king and somehow, with this particular structure, I guess there isn't a way to get to it. Yeah, I guess it's not nearly as scary as I thought it would be, but if there was a way my opponent could get to it, that could have disturbed things. So moving my king, I think I should have probably moved this pawn first to lock this down. I bet the engine says that. Nope. The engine says exactly the opposite. This is why I'm not good at chess, guys. Because I miss these things. Right here. Yeah, the engine says go ahead and move the king up. King move is perfectly acceptable here. Yeah, at this point in time, it's 100. Like I said, I felt like this was a 100% win for me. There was no way my opponent could get into the game, and maybe I should have done this. Right, restrict my opponent's king even more, give me access to this entire thing. But realistically, there was no way my opponent was getting through. So that's it. That's the game. All right, guys. Another long video. This one was exceptionally long, but I appreciate you guys hanging with me. This was a fun game, and I hope to see you guys around again. Thanks so much.